morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today, I want to talk about some of the weirdest Pokemon cards that we ever actually got, to the point that they're literally written in unknown. We're talking Alpha Lithograph. Now, Alpha Lithograph were a series of cards that were released as secret rare cards back in the Heart Gold Soul Silver era. And we had 4 Heart Gold Soul Silver sets. We had Heart Gold Soul Silver, Heart Gold Soul Silver Unleashed, Heart Gold Soul Silver Undaunted, and Heart Gold Soul Silver Triumphant. And in each of those sets, we got ourselves a lovely little secret rare that was the Alpha Lithograph. So it's time to remind ourselves of what they are. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, one of them, at least, was really, really good. Now, if we start off with Heart Gold Soul Silver, we had the Alpha Lithograph, and it's actually written in unknown. Now, what's really cool here, they've actually got a key. So they show you all of the 28 unknown, 26 letters plus exclamation mark and question mark, 4 rows of 7, works out very nicely. So you can figure it out yourself, but do remember that all of the unknown do vaguely look like the letter they are supposed to represent, so you can just about read it if you squint and try really hard. It lets you look at your opponent's hand. That's it. It is an item card that when you play it lets you look at your opponent's hand. And looking at your opponent's hand is actually quite a good thing. It means you can start to predict what they're going to do next turn. It means, let's say for argument's sake, nowadays you might be really worried about your opponent dropping a reset stamp. So you can look at your opponent's hand and you can decide whether or not they're going to. So that helps you play out your hand. Or you might be thinking about dropping a reset stamp or a Marnie, for instance. So you have a look at their hand and you decide whether or not you want to screw with their hand. Of course, looking at your opponent's hand, we have seen more recently. We saw that Gumshoe's GX had an ability that just let you once during your turn look at your opponent's hand. A very nice little ability. Plus, let's not forget 1 colourless energy, 10 damage, plus 50 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active. So it could have been a nice tech if your opponent was, shall we say, just trying to get a whole bunch of energy on their Pokemon as fast as they can. So that was kind of fun. We've also had it more recently, of course. Lavender Town is a stadium we literally have nowadays. Came around in Team Up, and it literally just is a stadium that lets you, once during your turn, look at your opponent's hand. Though being a stadium, it is double-sided. Now moving over into Unleashed, we did get another one of these. It was another Alpha Lithograph, very similar design. Still had the 28 characters on there, although it did look a little bit different. And it read, shuffle your deck. Simple as that. Shuffle your deck. Now, this one is quite a hard card to defend in terms of playability. Now, don't get me wrong, we often want to shuffle our deck. To use a recent example, the Oranguru from Sword and Shield lets you swap a card in your hand for the top card of your deck. So what you often do is essentially use this to draw a card. You take a card that's in your hand, you put it on top of your deck, and then you draw a card. The problem is, if you've got more than one Oranguru on your bench, you're still not actually going to be able to draw a second card, because the one you're going to draw is the one you just put on top of your deck. So you'll often see players, and I've done this many times before, you'll have one Oranguru down and play a second, or you'll use, say, a Scoop Up Net to reuse the one you already had down, but in the meantime you'll play something like a Quick Ball. And maybe you really want to search a basic, but what you're doing here by playing a Quick Ball is you're shuffling your deck, so there is now a new card on top of your deck. So now you can use a second Oranguru's ability while not definitely drawing the same card. You might, but it's not guaranteed anymore. Here's the thing though. I just told you I've been doing this with Quick Ball. There are a million cards out there that shuffle your deck, except they don't just shuffle your deck. You also search out a basic, or you play Evolution Incense to search out an evolution Pokemon. Or you play Ordinary Rod, and you shuffle up to 2 Pokemon and 2 basic energy from your discard pile into your deck, etc. Despite having a really nice effect, this is always a terrible card because there are a million other ways to shuffle your deck. Moving into Undaunted, we got, as far as I'm concerned, the coolest looking Alf lithograph, or certainly better than the first two. The dark coloration here really was kind of cool. And I think reading white on black is easier than reading black on white. Come at me, bro. Come at me. You still got the little key as the picture, and it read, return any stadium card in play to its player's hand. Now, it's weird that it said player's hand, not owner's hand, but language back then, I get that. This was fine, but again, it turned into a fairly pointless card. Because why would you not just play your own stadium? Playing your own stadium doesn't return the stadium to your opponent's hand. It gets rid of it and puts it in the discard pile. Now, maybe there's some extremely weird niche situation whereby you don't want to use your opponent's stadium now, but you do want to use it in the future, so you put it back in their hand, hoping that they'll play it down later. Because remember, they can play it down during their turn and use it immediately. And maybe you return it to their hand and then make them shuffle their hand into their deck, but come on. That's just weird. The problem with this card is that returning a stadium to your opponent's hand is kind of pointless, because they can just replay it and use it, when you could be playing your own stadium to get rid of it. Nowadays we have Chaotic Swell, as I refer to it, the perfect counter stadium, whereby you play it to replace one of your opponent's stadiums, but then if they try and play another stadium, that new stadium immediately gets bounced by Chaotic Swell without doing anything. It was nice to have a way to put a stadium in your opponent's hand, but whereas the first two Alf Lithograph weren't particularly good, but I can maybe make an argument for them, the first one more so. This one really was a pointless card. But then we get to Triumphant. And Triumphant brought us a really, really good Alf Lithograph. The sad thing is, this was the last one we ever had. So maybe if there had been more, they would have got better and better. We went from kind of playable to terrible to really good. Now, again, you still had the key at the top, although the fact that some of the rocks kind of coming out the image was a very, very cool effect. This might be the best looking, definitely between the final two. And it reads, look at all of your face-down prize cards. Now, you just got to look at them. You didn't get to turn them face up, but you were allowed to have a pen and paper and write them down. So it basically meant you would know where your prizes are. Now, if Alf Lithograph was out nowadays, I would really like it. Because here's the thing. We've got cards like Jirachi Prism Star, that if you draw it as a face-down prize card, you get to bench it and draw an extra prize. Greedy Dice does a very similar thing, although obviously doesn't need a bench space. But the thing is, it's got to be face-down prize cards. So there's a cool little use for that. But also, it just lets you look at your prizes. Town Map is a card that saw a huge amount of play because it let you just turn your prize cards face up. The thing is, Town Map could actually really backfire. I lost a game at UK Nationals against the Dan Middleton himself, Dan TDM, because I was playing a Verizon Genesect deck, and I kind of gave away the fact that my only copy of G-Booster, bearing in mind it was an A-spec so you'd only play one in your deck, kind of gave away the fact that G-Booster was prized. Which meant my opponent knew I could not get a one-hit KO, so Dan just piled energy on his Mewtwo and rolled me. Had I not played Town Map, Dan would not have been able to do the Mewtwo play because it would have been too risky in case I did get a KO, and I'd probably win that game. I win game 2, but it didn't matter. Then we drew because we'd won one game each. I literally lost a game because I played Town Map and gave my opponent the information. This meant that you could know what your prizes were without giving your opponent the information. At the time, well, for part of the time at least, we did also have Azalf back then. It let you, using the ability Time Walk, swap any card in your hand for a face-down Pokemon in your prizes. So you would pick up the Pokemon, show it to your opponent, and then put any card in your hand down to replace it. But then, of course, while you were doing that, you would write down what your prizes were, and you'd be good. As a fun little side note, cards like this, if you were playing a friendly game, there would generally be a gentleman's agreement that instead of wasting time writing down what your prizes were, you would just be able to look at your prizes when you had to take a prize. Wasn't always the case, but there was a lot of gentlemen's agreements going on, because the alternative was you waited while your opponent painstakingly wrote down all their prizes and then double-checked they hadn't made any mistakes. It's kind of got boring. So Alf was very good. But this Alf lithograph was also very good and saw a lot of play. Specifically, it saw play in Durant decks. Now, Durant was a deck whereby you milled one card from the top of your opponent's deck per Durant that you had in play. So you really needed 4 Durant in play in order to mill 4 cards on the top of your opponent's deck. But of course, sometimes Durant would end up in the prize cards. So what do? You get them out the prize cards. How do you get them out the prize cards? You use Rotom. Rotom had a lovely little poker power that let you switch the top card of your deck with one of your face-down prize cards. Rotom, incidentally, had come out in the previous Undaunted set. Now, the problem was you had to swap one of your face-down prize cards with the top card of your deck. So you needed to know what your face-down prize cards were. In comes Alf Lithograph. And incidentally, this was not just for Durant decks. Now, in terms of serious competitive play, top decks, etc., Durant was the deck in which this saw the vast majority of its play. But make no mistake about it, you could do this in any deck you like. It was a very cool card, it saw a lot of play, and by far and away the best of the Alf Lithograph. I do wonder what would have happened. Remember, we only had 4 Heart Gold Soul Silver sets, it did not last very long. And given that the 4th one was amazing, does that mean that we actually missed out on some really, really good ones down the line? The answer is, we will never know, ladies and gentlemen. We will never know. But for now, I would like to know what you thought about these cards. I'd like to know your memories. Do you have these cards? I'm fairly sure I have 4 of these lying around. I'm fairly sure I got all 4 of them. I'll have to go and have a look. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to know your memories and your thoughts, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where you can find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokémon in, but are pretty gosh darned awesome nonetheless. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.